Connie, thank you very much. Senator Pryor, always good to be with you. I want you to know that my esteemed critic, the queen of this church, Martha Ann Fox, is here. So I'm prepared to face her wrath on Sunday morning. But with that, I'd like to welcome everybody and thank everybody for coming. And by the way, Jordan Johnson's comments were that was really fantastic. All right, we're going to start. And I'm going to read one paragraph from your book, which I agree with you, Connie. I think it is a great political biography. This deals with Camden. This deals with Camden. Our backyard bordered on the Presbyterian church grounds. An English-style chapel, it was torn down years ago to make way for a new sanctuary and education building. For years, our minister was Horace Billy, who preached in a morning coat and striped trousers. Dad served as a church elder, and Mother a Sunday school teacher and an alto in the choir. In my memory, it seems as if we went to church every time the doors opened. Once a year, Mother promised Dad that when she turned 50, she'd leave the choir and sit with us on the family pew. But that never happened. Your mother, though, went on to do some great work, working with a group of missionaries. Would you tell a little bit about that, about her influence on you, and then how you yourself got into humanitarian work?
Let me see if is this on? Can we hear? Before I do that, Skip, thank you for letting us come today and just share a few stories and thoughts about stuff and old times. That's all I talk about today is old times. I don't know if any of y'all have that same experience or not, but it was so nice of Jordan to say those kind of things. Nice of y'all to have this wonderful luncheon and to allow Skip and myself to come. It was mentioned that Skip was the founder of the Political Animals Club. That has inspired another political animals club up in Fayetteville, another political animals club up in Jonesboro, and a week from tonight, down in Monticello at the University of Arkansas at Monticello, Skip and I will inaugurate. I'll just be tagging along with Skip the Monticello Political Animals Club, inspired by Skip Rutherford. So that'll be fun. I think they're going to allow us to come down and just once again tell some stories. One quick story, you mentioned the book, and I've got to give Don Harold Kearney, my wonderful Camden friend that I grew up with, and Anna Lee Harold was his mother. She was a student at what we call Henderson Brown, when it was the Methodist here in Arkadelphia, and she was a cheerleader for Henderson Brown. Anna Lee Harold, Sonny Harold, Don Harold, who helped me write this book, a wonderful writer, lives in New York now, and Don we grew up just a few blocks from each other in Camden, and one day a new couple moved in down the street on Cleveland Avenue, and it was the Botnick family, and they were from Michigan. And the Botnicks had two little boys about the same age as Don and myself, Sonny we called him. And one day, Sonny went down, he was about 6, 7 years old, went down to the Botnick house because the moving van was there, moving them in, and all the furniture was out in the yard, and Don was helping them take stuff in, and he came back a few minutes later up to the Harold home, and his mother looked at Sonny, and he had a black eye, and his nose was bleeding. And he says, "Sonny, what in the world happened to you down at the Botnick home? I thought you went down there to help them move in." He said, "Well, Mother, I did, but I don't know what happened. But I said something, I made a joke about the Pope, and they jumped on me and beat me up." And Anna Lee, the mother, said, "Well, Sonny, you should have known the Botnick boys were Catholics. foolish. You should have known not to have said anything about the Pope. He said, yeah, but I didn't know the Pope was. So anyway, that's my friend Don Harrell, and he would love being in such a gathering like this today. But Skip and I are proud to be here today, and thank you for that. Yeah, my mother was, I think my mother probably was the first female elder of the Presbyterian Church in Arkansas. If I'm not mistaken, I think she was. I do know this. She was the first female to seek a political office in Arkansas. She ran for circuit clerk of our county right after women got the right to vote in 1922 or 24, either one. I'm not quite sure which summer. But she ran against a very popular man named England Plunkett, who had been a World War I hero there in Camden. He had lost his leg in Germany, etc., and whatever. But he annihilated my mother, and I used to tell my mother, ask my mother, I said, Mother, did you run for circuit clerk of Ouachita County? Did you become the first woman candidate for circuit clerk or for any political office in Arkansas to have your name on the ballot? Because of the Equal Rights Amendment or something like that? She says, no, I just needed a job. And so that's why she ran for clerk, and she was not successful. But Skip, my mother was a very devout Christian woman, and she involved herself in going in 1956 or 7 into a program, and she was not a missionary, but she went into the jungles of British Guiana to teach the children in the mission area, in that particular jungle area, the English language, because they had not been back to the United States in a long time. She did go into this particular encampment and help to teach them. She chartered a Piper Cub from Miami, flew into the jungles of British Guiana, the Indian tribe called the Waiwais. The Waiwais had cleared a little path for the Piper Club to land and deposit my mother into the jungles. And my mother arrived, and there were 300 or 400 Native American men, I might say unclothed. And she landed the little Piper Club there in the jungles and stayed there for 6 months and helped the young children there learn the English language. Every night my mother bathed in the river with the natives and the alligators and everything else you can imagine, and snakes and mosquitoes and bugs. And she died in 1984 and still had huge places all over her body where she had been attacked by these swarms of insects that she could not tolerate, and I think that's why she left after 6 months. But anyway, that was my mom. She was very committed. She was a Renaissance woman. She was an artist and a wonderful singer and a spiritual leader, you could call her that, and quite a person, first woman, I think, to seek political office in Arkansas. Her name was Susie Newton Pryor, and still she has a great impact on people down in Camden and also certainly on our lives. And Barbara and my mother became fast best friends, I might say.
And you went to Albania and did something similar after you had left office. What did you do in Albania?
Well, I was, at that time, I was out of the Senate, and I was at Harvard at the Kennedy School of Government. And this was before I became the director of the Institute of Politics there. That particular year, actually it was a year's period, I had been offered a fellowship. I became a fellow at the Institute of Politics. And I kept reading about the Kosovo War. I was reading about all the thousands of people who were coming in from Macedonia, who were coming in from Kosovo, it was in the height of the Kosovo War, coming over the mountainsides. The Serbs had captured all of the able-bodied men, conscripted them into the service, and had also killed many of the able-bodied men, and the older men and women and children and wives came over the mountainside into Albania, and this is where they stayed. I became a volunteer. I tried through some friends of mine in the State Department to hook me up in the State Department to do a program of volunteerism, but they said, well, wait a minute, now you've had a heart attack, haven't you? And I said, yeah, I've had heart surgery, actually. They said, well, we can't take you. They said, we do have some friends at the International Rescue Committee in New York, and say, you call them up, here's the number, tell them who you are, what, blah, 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 and said it's possible they could use you in some capacity. So I went, 3 days later, Barbara was with me. I said, I've got some terrible news to tell you. I've been holding it for a few days, and I didn't want to tell you. She thought maybe I had a girlfriend or something. She said, what in the world? And I said, well, I'm going to Albania. And she said, you're going where? I said, Albania. She said, where is that? And I said, well, I told her I'm made ready, everything. She said, well, when are you going? I said, well, tomorrow. And so, sure enough, I did, and I was there almost a month, and I helped to supply the various refugee camps out throughout the little country of Albania. Albania is a poor, little godforsaken country. Skip says that 2 of his recent graduates at Clinton School have been from Albania, and so they were outstanding people. But it's a little poor school, country, and during World War II, the leader there was always in fear that they were going to be invaded by the Germans or the Russians or the Americans, and all of their money was put into the mountainside to establish and build pillboxes with cannons, guns, and everything to fortify themselves against the invasion. The truth was, no one wanted Albania. There wasn't any reason to invade Albania. I mean, they had no mineral resources.
Don't tell that to my students, please.
I apologize to them, but it was a great experience for that several weeks I was there, and I met a lot of wonderful people from many of the organizations that help supply and support refugees from all over the world.
When you were in high school, you were playing football for the Camden Panther football team, and then you reached out to a congressman by the name of Orrin Harris, whose daughter Carolyn Harris McLeod and her husband George are here. And Congressman Harris invited you to be a page in Washington, your first entrance into the Washington world. Will you talk about that? And I know you don't want to tell this story because you're tired of telling it. But there are people that haven't heard it, and I'm going to make you tell it. As long as I got this form, I'm going to make you tell it. You got to tell the story of the dime.
Well, first, Congressman Harris, Orrin Harris, and Carolyn's dad, and my dad were friends. My dad was kind of a political person in South Arkansas in Ouachita County. And of course, Orrin Harris was 33 miles down the road from Camden, down in El Dorado. He'd become a prosecutor, and my dad supported him when he ran for Congress, etc. So Orrin Harris, I guess, was my mentor, and he was kind to me. And one night I'd been down to the Strand Theater. We lived almost downtown Camden, and it's right where the old Sears store is now. Our home place. And I was walking home, and I had just been to a movie called Born Yesterday with Judy Holliday. And you all remember, Whitney Holman, I believe, was in that movie. Barbara, am I right on that? Okay, she's our movie person. Yeah, and so I was just a student in high school, junior, I believe, at that time. And I came home, and I was so enamored with Washington because Born Yesterday was filmed in Washington. I came home, and I sat down in my little desk upstairs, my room on Graham Street in Camden, and I wrote, Dear Congressman Harris, I've just seen a movie called Born Yesterday, filmed in Washington. I'm a junior in high school. I'd love to be your page this summer if that's possible. Well, I didn't hear anything for a long time. Finally, after 2 or 3 weeks, I got an airmail letter from Congressman Harris's office. Says, Dear David, our page cannot report for duty this summer, so I have a vacancy. So for 3 months, 1951, wow, I became a page, and that opened my eyes to Washington. It opened my eyes to national politics, you might say. And I've never had a more wonderful experience than that. And Richard, that was the summer of 1951 that I met Parker Westbrook, for example. He was on one of the House staffs at that. I think he was on the staff. Maybe it took Gathings, Congressman Gathings, or perhaps on the staff of Boyd Tackett at that time, one of the two congressional leaders, congressmen. But I had a great summer. It was the summer when Joe McCarthy was at his height. The first day at school, at work, I might say, when I reported for duty, and my mother let me out in front of the U.S. Capitol building. And she and my sister Elmer, they drove back down to Arkansas from Washington, D.C., a 2 or 3 day drive at that time. And I walked up the steps of the Capitol. I walked into the doorkeeper's office. The doorkeeper was a man from Pascagoula, Mississippi, by the name of William Fishbake Miller. I reported into Mr. Fishbake Miller's office, and there he was waiting for him, chomping a cigar and everything. I said, "I'm David Pryor. I'm Congressman Harrison's page this summer." He said, "We've been looking for you." He said, "You got to go down to the Senate. They've had an all-night filibuster on the Senate floor, down the hall, down to the Capitol. And you've got to go and report. They're out of pages. Everybody's gone home, gone to sleep. They're filibustering on the floor of the Senate." And I said, "Well, where is the Senate?" He said, "Right down that way." And I took off. I had a brand new pair of black shoes and a white shirt and black jacket, coat and everything, with my page outfit. And I took off down there. And I'll never forget, I didn't know where the Senate chamber was, but I cracked open the door and I walked into the Senate chamber. Here we were, and here I was in the chamber of the United States Senate, and I looked down in the well of the Senate chamber, just a few feet away, and there was a man who looked like he'd been up all night, hadn't shaved, he looked pretty rough, and his tie was all crumpled up, and his shirt was wrinkled, and he was filibustering on the floor of the Senate. And just as I opened the door and walked into the chamber, he snapped his finger and said, "Come down here." So I was a page, and I said, "Is he talking to me?" And he pulled out from his pocket, I'll never forget it, he pulled out a $10 bill. And he handed me this $10 bill. And he scratched out while he was filibustering. He said, here's my address, here's my apartment out on Wisconsin Avenue, Massachusetts Avenue, maybe. And he said, you go out there and get a taxi and take this money, and you go out to this apartment, go to the 3rd floor, and go back in my bedroom, look in the closet, bring me my bedroom slippers. I went out and saw, I'd never called, from Camden, we didn't have any taxis. I didn't know how to haul a taxi down. I didn't get a taxi's attention. And so sure enough, when I run the U.S. Capitol building, Will, and there I was out there, and I flopped down in a taxi, and flagged down in a taxi. I got in the taxi, I gave the taxi this address, went out there, got the bedroom slippers, came back, and lo and behold, the man I was doing that for, I did not know who he was. It was Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, and Joe McCarthy. And so I'd been to his apartment out in Mass Avenue, I think it was, and in his bedroom, brought him his bedroom slipper and gave him to him. But when I left, I'm a superstitious guy. Skip wanted me to tell this story. You probably heard it. This story made it into Reader's Digest. But I'm superstitious, so my last day as a page, I took a dime out of my pocket, and I walked down to the bottom of the tunnels and walked way back down a corridor that was almost dark, going back to Camden, Arkansas the next day to finish up my senior year. I took this dime and I reached behind a huge granite pillar, and I put this little dime back there, and I said, "Dime, someday I'm going to come back and find you when I become a congressman. You sit there and bring me good luck all these years till I get there." Well, sure enough, about 25 years later, 20-something years later, I became a congressman. And I went down there, and I reached back there behind that pillar, And lo and behold, my dime was still there. And I pulled it out, and I used to be invited all the time. I put it back in there, but I used to be invited every year, every spring, to speak to the Page School graduation ceremony. And I would tell them that story, and I'd always end the story, and I'd say, that just shows you that sometimes you can be superstitious, and it works. But it does tell you one thing, they don't clean the Capitol building. So they get a kind of kick out of it. It was corny, but that story made it through the ages. It's called, as they say, the dime story.
So you went back and retreated, and you completed the dream that you said you would.
I'm going to tell y'all a story about him.
Well, I got another story before we get on me. One of the more remarkable stories about you in Arkansas politics started out when you were working for then Governor Cherry, driving Governor Cherry, in a race with a guy named Orville Faubus. That began later, you go to the legislature under a governor named Orville Faubus, where you become a young Turk, like a Jimmy Argue and a Will Bond, that would stand up for very progressive things against a pretty powerful governor, and the numbers big against you. And then he ends up running against you for governor, and your life goes with him in full circles that ends with before Governor Faubus passed away. There is an ending to that story that most people don't know. They know the beginning of the story and they know the rivalry of the story, but most people don't know the ending of the story. Would you talk about your relationship with maybe the most, at least during his lifetime, the most powerful and well-known Arkansas political figure?
Well, Faubus and I, Jim, appreciate this. We fought even when I had my little newspaper. Barbara and I started a newspaper in 1957 in Camden, and to a large degree, our energies were funneled. Our energies were inspired, I guess you would say, by what was going on in the state at that time, and my sadness over seeing Governor Cherry defeated, and then a few years later, seeing what was happening to our state in 1957. We started a little weekly newspaper. For 4 years had the paper, and I ran for the legislature during that time. Barbara and I were raising our boys in Camden at the time, in that time sequence. But Faubus and I were, I guess you would say, were about as mortal enemies as you could find. I wrote editorials just about every Thursday about him, about what was going on, all like that. Not to cite any bravery, because that didn't have much to do with it, but it was just what we did at the time, because that's kind of who we were. But I was elected to the legislature with Barbara's help, and door to door. And so when I got to the legislature, still Faubus and I were just like this. And I was kind of a unique guy, because I had survived the kind of what you might call the local Faubus group or machine down in our county in order to be elected from Washita County to the state legislature. So I was kind of, they just looked back at me and they couldn't quite figure out who this cat was from Camden that had survived all this onslaught of everything, and in spite of everything that had evolved as the victor over the Faubus group in the local politics of Washita County. But after all that, Faubus and I still had this terrible relationship. And Skip wanted me to mention something I think that, and I just picked it up, it was on my desk. I look at it just about every time I'm in the office. When I had my heart surgery, is that what you're talking about? When I did my
That's one, and then we'll talk to you about it's that knowledge to the second part.
I'm going to find my glasses here. This older man came to the intensive care unit, at the UAMS where I was in intensive care, And he was trying to convince the nurse on duty that night, I guess late, that he was a former governor, and he wanted to see Senator Pryor. And they said, oh, you can't see Senator Pryor, he's in intensive care. He said, well, I'll just write him a note. So here's what he left at the nurse's station. He left this at the nurse's station. I look at it all the time, and it says this: mind you, we were mortal enemies. I tell you, we were fighting all the time with each other. David, once I helped beat you politically, that's when I ran against Senator Cleveland, and then you beat me. Bygones are bygones. I wish you well, or believe always. So anyway, I just thought that that was kind of a little lesson here, I guess, that I look at all the time. I don't want to say it was about forgiveness, or I don't want to put too many religious connotations to it, but Orville Faubus did sign that. And we ended up, I don't want to say being close friends, but respectful of each other, and speaking to each other, and once or twice traveling together on little trips around the state. Once to dedicate a cemetery up in Faulkner County one summer afternoon, Sunday afternoon, years ago. Faubus and I did.
Well, David Pryor's not giving himself enough credit, because let me tell you the backstory of this. When Orville Faubus, in the latter years of his life, was on tough financial times, and it was and was diagnosed with cancer. And this was the guy that drove him to the hospital for cancer treatments. And a lot of people don't know that. And so, you know, Reverend Scardies believe in reconciliation and forgiveness. This is the model right here for doing it.
Well,
because there was nothing politically in common between the two of you, but the heart was the same, and it was a great gesture that when Orville Faubus had to go get a treatment, it was David Pryor that took him, and that's pretty big. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is the friendship, and I think it's missing in politics today, and I think you and your late House colleague set the example. And I remember working as a staffer for you, and one of the things you told me one time, you said, don't you ever schedule me in an event that I have to campaign against John Paul Hammersmith. I will not say a bad word about him. I will not campaign for any of his opponents. I just will not. We went to the House together. I respect him. We may differ politically, but I will not campaign against him. Would you talk about how you and John Paul Hammersmith, different political parties, developed this civil discourse and friendship that is so missing today in American and Arkansas politics?
Well, John Paul was a friend, and even when I got to the Senate, we remained friends. He was still in the House at that time. And so many people, especially in this, I must say, weird election moment we find this great nation involved in at this moment. I hope we survive it. It's an endurance contest, and frankly, it's scary. I won't go into a lot of personal thought about it, but it is a dangerous time for us, I think, in our country. But really, the personal relationships are what I think today is missing in the political ingredient, I guess you would say, of American politics. Those relationships where you would travel together, where you would have Sunday night suppers and with a Republican group, a Republican household one Sunday night, and a Democrat the next Sunday night, and vice versa. Everybody would bring a dish or whatever, and you got to know people like Alan Simpson of Wyoming, and Jack Danforth of St. Louis, and Mark Hatfield of Oregon, and those people that you develop bonds with. I mean, Democrats are one thing, but today it is sad that Democrats and Republicans do not have that personal relationship any longer. people say, well, what happened to all that? Well, I don't know what happened to all that. I can't quite describe it, but I will say this. If you want to read something that will scare you to death, if you want to read something, it's a recent book. It's called Dark Money, and it's written by Jane Mayer, and she's formerly with New York Times or Washington Post or Atlantic or she's one of the great writers. And this book tells you about the proliferation of all of the major PAC funds, all of the 501c3 organizations that, to avoid the tax code, can't avoid the tax code, funnel these multi-millions and millions of dollars into super PACs, and all these groups just spring up from nowhere, and before you know it, we have no idea of who is giving to the political candidates, and that's a long way from what the spirit of the Watergate legislation after Watergate taught us. But Skip, I just think that people right now, we've lost that ability to know each other and to visit with one another and to sit down and break bread with one another, to travel into each other's homes together. And Barbara and I go to Cody, Wyoming to see Alan Simpson every now and then out. And he's not a bigger Republican in the world than Alan Simpson. And Jack Danforth in St. Louis and others that we've mentioned. But I'm so sorry that has happened to us, and I'm sorry that money and I must say greed is just kind of taken over, it seems like, our political system. We have no idea today who's contributing to political figures, politicians, and organizations. You can't trace it even because of the way the 501c3s have taken advantage of the tax code and the political system. Then, of course, the case Citizens United came about just about 6 years ago, and that exacerbated the situation to a very large extent. And whoever is our president, elected in November, I think the most important thing that president, Democrat or Republican, whatever the issue might be, there's no more important issue than who is going to be the next appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court, and maybe the next 2 appointments or 3 appointments. That is going to be the telltale of whether I think this country is going to be bought and paid for by a few selfish interest groups, or whether or not the people, in fact, are going to continue to rule. Skip, I didn't ask. I'm going to tell a story.
No, I've got one more. No, you get feel my comment. No, I'm going to get a question first. I'm going to get mine through because this is about you, not me. But one of the things that we worked on together, we worked on a lot of issues when I worked for you. You were great to his staff and to your staff, and you let staff people, get out there and get involved and take risks and make mistakes, and I made a lot of them. But one issue that we worked on is going to be featured as the feature film in the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival this year. And it is by your friend Eric Schlosser's book about command and control. And it's the story of the Titan II missile explosion at Damascus, Arkansas on September 19th, 1980, at which point a megaton nuclear warhead was on top of 18 missiles in our state. You and I started working on that issue, and talk a little bit about it.
Well, we had these missiles. They were in Kansas, and they were in Arkansas, and were they Nevada? No, Arizona, one other state. And they were basically in sort of the west and central and middle part of the United States. And Skip and I would drive around a lot and whatever, and going back and forth to dinners and rallies and pie suppers and everything you can imagine. Late at night, we just visit with people, and we got to know some of the people that were employed at the missile silos, some of the military and some of the civilians and the sheriffs and whatever. And everybody would say, we don't have any kind of warning system. If one of these things might go off or something. We said, what? I said, no, there's no way to warn the local people around us that one of these missiles may be in danger of exploding or being triggered. And so one thing led to another, and I introduced an amendment. I thought I got Bob Dole, Nancy Casabon, myself, and maybe John McCain. I'm not sure, but it was one of the western states that had some to say.
Deacon, I think Deacon. Dennis Deacon.
Dennis Deacon,
that's
Arizona.
Yeah.
That's right. We got Dennis and the rest of us, and we introduced an amendment. I was kind of the ringleader of it. They probably thought I was driving them crazy trying to get additional sponsors because the Air Force didn't want this amendment. They didn't want anyone to believe that one of these missiles might get out of control or by accident or through purpose or whatever, exploding. They didn't want anybody to even think about that. So we violated what the Air Force desires and introduced the amendment. Literally while the amendment was pending over the next several weeks and discussions were being had, the Air Force was on the Hill lobbying, oh, we don't need this amendment, we don't need this. Lo and behold, what time, 2 a.m. or something, Damascus, Arkansas. You tell them about the missile, what happened?
Well, we'd been working on this amendment, and people thought we were crazy. The Air Force said, you're wrong, and there's no danger. But all the airmen and the people that worked on the missile said, the Air Force is not telling you the truth. So here we were, a senator listening to some, at that time, very young and experienced and certainly not military savvy, young assistant, saying, I think these things are going to explode. I think we got a real problem. If somebody has an accident, this thing could blow up, and they're not trained, they're overworked. And all these young airmen that were working on it were coming to me after work and coming to our staff and just saying, this is really bad, this is really, really bad. And I believed them. I thought they were right. And so one night we were sitting at home, Billy and I were sitting at home, and our friend Malcolm McNair was over from Fayetteville, getting ready to have dinner, and the phone rang. It was one of the airmen that said, one of the people working on the missile dropped a wrench. It has pierced the coat. This missile's going to explode. It's pierced the exterior. And I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, we don't know. And I said, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a warhead 600 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb on top of it. So we don't know what's going to happen to the warhead. And I said, well, okay, that's not good. What do we need to do? And they said, well, you need to let Senator Pryor know. So he was in Hot Springs. So I called him. I said, DP, what are you doing? Nothing, what are you doing? I said, well, we got a little problem. He said, well, what's our problem? I said, well, those missiles we've been talking about. He said, yeah, I'm trying to get that amendment through. I hope I can get it done. I said, well, you better hurry because it's going to explode tonight. He said, what? And I said, it's going to explode. He said, how do you know? And I said, because the people that are working on it, that have been down there in it, said it's going to explode. He said, what's the Air Force saying? I said, the Air Force saying it's not. And he said, well, what happens if it does? I said, well, if the warhead goes off, Hot Springs is gone, Little Rock's gone, and all of Arkansas is gone. If it doesn't go off, we don't know what happens to it, and we don't know what the Russians are going to do when they see this missile activity.
Headed to Moscow.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And I said, look, here is the dilemma. I said, do we tell people? This is really a serious question. Do you tell people what's getting ready to happen when you know, and the United States Air Force is denying it? Do you tell people that there could be an incineration of your state or a major radiation leak? And David Pryor says, well, what would we do if we told people? And I said, I don't know. I guess we all get in our car and try to get across the bridge. And I thought that wouldn't do any good because Arkansas is going to blow up anyway. So you said you'll panic people. We just can't. We have to trust the Air Force on this, and we have to let this happen. So 2 o'clock in the morning, there was no TV. The TVs went on. The missile blew. They called me. The first thing I looked around was I thought, my family's here, the neighborhood's still, my house is here, kids are okay. Where's the warhead? And the warhead was somewhere in a ditch that they couldn't find. So I called David Pryor and I said, the missile blew. And he said, I said, we've got to think of something for you to say. This was at 3 in the morning. And he said, well, you better hurry because Channel 4 is in my living room. And I said, well, I'm going to have to hurry real quick. So talk about when the next day Walter Mondale was coming to a Democratic convention. I wasn't in the room with you and Walter Mondale, but tell me about the conversation.
Well, I had raced on early in the morning, probably before the sun came up. We were actually, Barbara and I were in Hot Springs, and the Arlington Hotel was full of Secret Service, and Mondale maybe had come in late the night before. That was the night he was going to address the next day, the Democratic State Convention. And so I went upstairs, I told the Secret Service about our dilemma, and I said, I need to see the Vice President. And I was escorted to his room, and he was still in a robe, and he came to the door, and we went back he had a little living room, and I went back into his bedroom. He was on the telephone with Harold Brown, the Secretary of Defense. And Harold Brown would not tell, Harold Brown would not tell the Vice President of the United States, he would not admit to the Vice President that there was a nuclear warhead on this missile. And Walter Mondale said, blankety blank, I won't use the word especially, said, blankety blank, Harold, I'm the Vice President of the United States, and I demand to know what was on that missile. And he said, okay, it was a nuclear warhead. So that was it. And from then on, it was just news. One call, I've got calls from NBC, CBS, all the major networks, because my name was on that amendment to create an early warning system. So naturally, if you're in New York, you look down the list, okay, Pryor, Arkansas, who's he? I don't know, but he's something to do with the nuclear Titan program. Let's call him. I'll never forget a radio call I got from Brooklyn, from a little radio station. I don't know, I picked up the phone. It was this young woman, she sounded like she was 15 or 16 years old, intern. So Senator Pryor said, yeah, this so-and-so radio station, whatever, in Brooklyn, New York, yes. She said, I want to know about that nuclear warhead down there. And I said, she said, when they evacuated the city of Damascus, was there was the subway system crowded? I said, subway system. I said, listen, most of these folks have never even seen an airplane, much less. I said, no, we don't have any subways in Damascus. But anyway, it was really a time of great confusion and misconception, and ultimately, when we got back into session a few days later in the Senate, we got Bob Dole and the rest of us from the other states, Nancy Casaubon, and we came forward with a proposal to create, I guess you would say, an early warning system. And by that time, the Air Force had decided to bury all of the missile silos underground.
All right, well, so Carney's running us out. But
wait a minute. What I want to say is we're obviously going overtime, but nobody cares that we're going overtime.
No, we've got to quit.
But there are two things that I want to happen. I want David to tell the Skip Rutherford story.
We'll get to that one.
And I also want to honor Mackie Yoakum's question. He's got a question. You don't have a question anymore? Okay.
Mackie, let me tell this story on Skip. Most of you folks in this room, even though you know Skip and you know Billy, you know the Rutherford clan, and have known them forever, you helped them and been with them all these years, and they've helped you, you've helped them, your family. Most of y'all don't know how Skip got to Little Rock. Y'all don't know that. Let me tell you. In my campaign in 1978, when I was running for the Senate, I was governor at the time, and I was running against two very formidable guys, Ray Thornton and Jim Guy Tucker. And we got in a tough runoff, and I won that runoff. And finally, during the summer, I didn't have much of a Republican. That's when the state had sanity. We didn't have any Republicans. I shouldn't say that. I expunged the record for that. But what happened is I had a great coordinator that I didn't really know at the time up in Northwest Arkansas who had just graduated from university. He was working at the McElroy Bank on the square, oldest bank in Arkansas, owned by Hayden McElroy, our friend, and Barbara is the godmother to Misty, who is Misty Hawkins, a member of this church. But anyway, Skip worked at Hayden's bank, Hayden McElroy's bank. So I keep hearing about this guy, Skip Rutherford, who helped me in Washington County and those counties in Northwest Quadrant, who helped me pull out a victory up there, and I needed it so badly. And so finally I met with Skip, and we had a talk, and I went to Hayden, my friend, and I said, Hayden, I've got some good news and bad news. He said, well, give me the good news first. I said, well, good news for you is I just met Skip Rutherford, who works at your bank in Fayetteville. He said, oh man, he's an up-and-comer. He's going to be president of that bank someday, blah, blah, blah. He just went on and on about Skip Rutherford. I said, well, let me tell you the bad news. I've just hired him. And he's going to come to Little Rock and run our operation from Little Rock. And that's when Billy and Skip came to Little Rock, Arkansas. Just think, y'all would have been rich bankers if y'all stayed up there with Billy. But that was a great opportunity for me and for us, and also for all of Arkansas to be able to participate with Skip and Billy and their family and to benefit from their leadership.
It's been a 40-year friendship, and
yeah,
I love this guy.
Wow, okay, 40 years.
So, okay, here's a question, I got one more for David Pryor.
Okay, Mackie, do you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mackie, ask it.
It's about current policy.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to go, so you ask it.
He told
me not that he wasn't going to answer it, but that was my question. So maybe he'll answer it from you.
By recent information, the current Senate has met fewer days since 1956. They don't meet, they don't act. Currently, Senate will not be changing the majority of Republicans. Are we going to see any kind of change in the Senate or in the House where they actually do something?
2 months ago, they thought people that deal in this sphere, which I don't any longer, and never did really at that height, but 2 months ago, they thought that
Will we see any changes in the United States Senate and Congress in this election? Will there be any changes in the Senate or the Congress? Mackie's question related to the fact that Congress hadn't met and Senate hadn't met very often.
that's right. Senate's meeting very few times now, I might say. Very few votes are taking place in the Senate. The House, I think, is going to remain under Republican control. There's a chance that the Senate may switch and become Democratic. That's just in this weird climate, I don't think anyone knows. I really don't think. Nor do we know the coattail effect of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. We don't know what the down ballot issues, the governors, the congressmen, the House, the senators, and whatever. We just don't know what the down ballot effect is going to be. And I think the polling in that strata down there below the presidential politics area, I think the polling has not been very forthcoming. Maybe in the last 4 or 5 weeks of the campaigns, we'll zero in on those. I would say right now we may not gain the House, but I think we could gain the Senate back.
Jim, do you have a question, Jim?
Senator, if Hillary were to win, or if the Republicans were to lose control of the Senate, is there any chance there would be last-minute confirmation of Judge Garland by the current Senate?
I can't answer that. I would say that there are probably according to the procedures of the Senate, which are old and quaint. I would say that the Republicans probably, even if they lose control of the Senate, it may be that they could tie the Senate up for several weeks and go into the first of the year without confirming this Supreme Court justice. I would hope he would be confirmed. They say he's a very good judge. They say he's got a great record. He's not a flaming liberal or conservative. You know, he's a moderate type individual. And so I wish I could answer that question, but I can't.
We had a red chair and a blue chair up here, and there's no significance into which chair is. The senator's in a red chair, and Skip is in the blue chair.
Well, I just want to say that we thank you all for allowing us to come here, and it's fun, you know, to have worked with David Pryor, to have learned from him, and now to get to travel Arkansas telling stories with him. It just doesn't get any better than this. I would just tell you. So, Senator Pryor, always fun to be with you, and thank you all for coming.
Well, I'll invite everyone down next Thursday night to Monticello if y'all want to come down. Thank you so very much. Thank you.